Okay, so I suppose I'm going to start. I've prepared a couple of slides, but I feel now I can go much faster than I was that I expected, because I think many of you know many of the things. So it will be just really just a kind of reminder for us of what Leni Dam represent in her what I call a work approach model. So let me move on to the second slide. Yes. So I think you've all come across Leni's publications, so you know her as an author, researcher, pedagogical advisor. But when I think of her, for me, the teacher's perspective is the most important one, her being a teacher and teacher training. That's what we've also seen at the video. And I was very happy to meet her when she attended a last week TEFL conference in Brno a couple of years ago. That's where I will start. That's where she was sharing with us her approach. And I really believe that a good starting point for thinking about her work is what she first shared with us as a story from her teaching career in 1973, realizing that there might be a huge difference between what she was teaching or what she hoped she was teaching and what the students were learning, had been learning, or rather had not been learning. Yeah, this difference between teaching and learning. So this is what she mentioned was a starting point for her to rethink the roles and rethink on what a teacher can do to support her students. And as we saw in the video, which I think was filmed in 1998, and there was a huge journey undertaken, and she found fantastic ways how to do things differently, how to really make her students, her learners learn. So the model that you are sent, the flower model, comes from one of Leni's publications, a part of a series of books on learner autonomy. This was Learner Autonomy 3, published in 1995. And the name of this book is From Theory to Classroom Practice. But once again, I was quite surprised actually to realize that this was the title, because what to me, it sounds to be the other way around. Yeah, that she started in her classroom, and that the focus has been there in the classroom practices among the students, in communication with the students, learners, and then reaching out to theory, and of course bringing it back to the classroom. So I think the dynamics is mutual and both-sided, and that's why I included here the photo of David Little, because as many of you have also experienced this fascinating dynamics between the two of them and between the theory and practice. Yeah, I think that's what their relation and what their cooperation represents really nicely, how those two poles can contribute to each other. So when you start reading the text or listening to Leni's presentations, talks, she always emphasizes the focus of teaching being a development of learner autonomy. So one of the articles I will be referring to today is Developing Learner Autonomy with School Kids, because I think it corresponds the best with the video that we were able to watch. And it comes from a book that is called Fostering Autonomy and Language Learning, and there is a section called Promoting Learner Autonomy. And I think this nicely shows that it's this focus on processes. Yeah, thinking of autonomy as a process of something that is changing, ideally changing for better, or developing, and there needs to be something done, yeah, by both the teacher and the learner. So the teacher promotes it, fosters it. These are all the verbs that we will be using a lot today, probably. And the image, the figure here in this slide shows once again a bit more of a starting position for Leni, where she was thinking of moving classroom practices from teacher-directed practices to learner-directed practices. But already here we can see the moment of cooperation being the central one. And later on I will introduce yet another model that she included in her later articles, where this has been developed a bit further. So this is the model that you were sent, and I will be referring to it as well as to the video, and I will be also adding some elements that come from Leni Dam's articles. If some of you wanted to have the presentation, I can share it, and I've included a list of all the publications that I came across at the end that might be relevant. So I started to divide the flower, and actually I ruined the flower, and started with the petal. Is that the word? Petal features role, because for me that's where I really see the strong emphasis of what Leni has been representing. And these are the verbs, first of all, that I came across most often. This would be that teacher's roles is to support student in their learning, considering options, establishing, creating, developing learning environment. This is mentioned a lot, that this is the role and responsibility of the teacher to take care of the overall environment, of all the factors that might affect the learners, and of course also be stimulating. And then there are more like traditional role, like provide information, but it's important to realize that it's information on learning options, on learning as a process. And then when we come to responsibility, so the teacher should pass over responsibility to the learner, but make them also willing to take it, to accept it. And the word responsibility is also crucial. That's why I devoted another slide to it, because this is also emphasized a lot by Leni, that the teacher is, even if they should be ready to share the responsibility, they are not giving it up. She also here, and they are responsible for all the elements, for all the stages, for all the factors. So not only the result, but also the process. That's maybe what we might not so naturally think of, but that they are responsible for the learning process, for providing options. She also emphasizes, and that's been a discussion, I think, in one of the previous focus group sessions, demands, restrictions, requirements. Her approach is very always aware of possible curricular restrictions or possible contexts where the teacher cannot let go completely, but needs to work within an institutional context. So that's also emphasized a lot here, that this needs to be taken into consideration by the teacher and needs to be transparent for the students as well. What are the limitations? What are the demands? And and that's why in the video, we could really see very often her really being in quite traditionally in charge, of taking all those notes and making sure that things are clear and being sure that the process is documented. Really, the responsibility, I think, is very clear and very visible in the video. Okay, when we look at the other component, the second part of the flower, and the learner's role, it starts from emphasizing the active approach to learning and being learning with others. So learners are expected to involve in social learning, and what is also emphasized a lot is the way they should be active in activating the knowledge, connecting new information with things they already know. And the theoretical like background or sources that Leni Dam draws on is, of course, by David Little. I've already mentioned this mutual communication, but she also refers to Barnes. This is being one of her starting point also. Here I chose a quote that she refers to a lot in her articles about this moment of new information being connected to previous information. Okay. So going back to responsibility, learners' role is to be willing to take charge, but for that they need to be ready. And I think in the model, it might be the other order of those two things. It might have been me who changed them, but yeah, it's difficult to decide. Yeah, what needs to happen first, whether they need to be willing first or ready first. But definitely there is this. There needs to be this teacher's contribution. We cannot expect learners to be ready and willing, all of them and always. It's also part of our role to help them if they are not completely ready or completely willing. And that's, I think, a very nice also moment when in one of her texts, Leni mentions that they need to be feeling responsible, the feeling. And in the video, where there are nice moments, like the two young ladies or girls here, when asked, do you think you will need my help? There's really a very funny moment. Look, my daughter is a similar age, so I could completely understand what is happening in between the two of them. And then, do you remember what they said? Do you think you will need my help? They felt responsible. They said no. Yeah, very quickly, just eye contact, quick eye contact, and they said no. No. I think it's great. Yeah, that they were probably feeling that they made their decision and they decided for themselves. But, and I've already mentioned that before, that there are those restrictions. They are not free to choose whatever they want. And it works, it should work once they know what is expected and what is demanded of them. So this picture shows a scheme that is a bit more complex than the original one. And now we can see the responsibilities are shared, and the ideal is the learning-centered environment. So not even learner-centered, but learning-centered. And that's where Leni shows how the responsibilities should be shared and how they also work on a continuum of different stages. And looking back leads naturally to planning, and then back to evaluation and new planning. The left part comes from the model, from the flower model, aims and objectives. And what is mentioned there is development of learned autonomy and development of communicative competence. But I think if we think of that, and I was just actually kind of randomly listing things that sometimes we come across in different descriptions or demands or ideals of what language education should be targeting at. And I think that many of those things actually come from this combination of thinking of how to support students in becoming more autonomous and how they, because I don't think they only develop their communicative competence, but if they work in scenarios, or if they work like we saw that in the video, and like we know it from Leni Dam's publications, there's much more going on, and there are transferable skills involved, or if we want to call them integrated skills, they are also present. Of course, negotiation, this will be mentioned, this is covered in the model. Many of those skills are sometimes called employability skills, soft skills, or whatever, but it's the core is looking beyond the communicative competence training and trying to involve other aspects, I think. So please take the right part of the slide as just my suggestions, yeah, of what actually might be targeted. Yeah. The aim that Leni, the declaration of hers is that learners are engaged in authentic language use. And in her article, she also refers to positive feedback that she received in her courses. And even the students themselves can see that it's much more than just learning English. And they would mention different elements. I included here just one quote of a student mentioning cooperation and planning. And yeah, this would be once again, this just demonstrates that there are skills from different kind of fields or areas that are all targeted and all practiced in those situations that we were watching in the video. And why is that possible? I think the why is that happening is because negotiation is in the scheme in the center. So everything is negotiated between the learners, among the learners, and between the learners and the teacher. They negotiate what to do, and they negotiate how they are going to do it. And the video, the photo shows a situation when the students were discussing how to organize their homework. And at first they were not really sure how to do that, but they find a way how to negotiate the different roles. Also saying no to each other, but then finding a way how to make a plan together. So let me move on. Yes. I've divided the negotiation into two parts because very often it involves materials. In the model, teaching and learning materials are mentioned, and it shows that there should be a variety of materials, that they should reflect learners' needs and interests. There is a variety of authentic materials that are included, and also learner designed materials. And that's why I added other material sources that I used in the courses, because for me they also can be listed as materials. The logbooks students write, they become their learning material. They become things they learn from and they learn by as they document their learning process and as they use them for communication. And maybe if we are going to discuss later today how to apply those principles and practices into our teaching practice, it does not have necessarily to be logbooks. I was thinking in an academic context, this might be different sorts of reports, group work reports, or maybe drafts that students somehow use for communication with us and for getting our feedback or for getting their peers' feedback. In the video and in the texts, posters are mentioned as, once again, a material that is used to communicate, to visualize the learning process. And therefore, I would also consider it to be a learning material, something that is created either by the teacher for the students or the other way around. We have seen in the video both types of posters that are, once again, visualizing the learning process. And then, we didn't see that in the video, but it's mentioned in text. Portfolios that focus more on the product of some final versions of texts, students' written products or oral products that would also, I think, correspond to the category students designed, learner designed materials. As very often other students might learn from them as well, and of course, okay. So this is the second part of negotiation. Negotiation and cooperation, of course, also involves moments when students ask for help, and this might be asking for help one another or asking for help, advice, the teacher. We have also seen very nice moments in the video where the teacher role, once again, is to offer the help, but it can happen that it's denied or it's not required by the students, or that the students first here in this photo, that they first clarify the things and between, and when this does not work, only then they reach out to the teacher. I will be speaking about evaluation a bit more, but it's also an element that is negotiated among learners and with the teachers on different levels, as we will see in a minute. The flower model also includes activities that should, similarly to materials, reflect individual interests, values, and needs of the students. And we've seen a variety in different groups choosing different projects, and this being completely fine, that some of the students are going to read about racism, but some of them focus on fashion and theaters. but there was once again teacher stepping in to make sure that the demands are met, that whatever choice they make, that they are able to reach the product or to complete the work as expected or as demanded. So that's why the choice of a theater topic was questioned, not because of this being bad or wrong, but because of this might being maybe a bit too narrow, not covering the requirements for the final expected project or presentation. And what I really appreciated when looking at the video was also the possibility of students to work at their own pace. I have to say this is sometimes a problem for me, and this really showed that it was also okay for, or not required that they all progress in exactly the same stages. So there were groups who were taking much more time because this was what they needed, or maybe they just, this was what they preferred even. So the principle here is to approach all learners and make them involved actively and positively. Let me now make a short comment about target language. What Leni has mentioned in her text is that the use of target language is essential. And there's also a note on that it might be easier, I've also come across this quote, it might be easier to get learners to use the foreign language in a group first. And that's what I thought we might be also able to discuss later, because I think this is a typical issue that we teachers address, like how natural is it, especially if we do have students, homogeneous groups who don't share the language, or who share a different language than the target one. If this is really so easy and natural for them to use the target language, how to stimulate that, and how to really make the use of target language the core principle and both the means and the aim of the activities. This picture shows also a moment when target language was actually something they were learning at the moment, because as I mentioned before, the aims are more complex. So they are not only learning, or we have not seen them learning, let's say, certain vocabulary area or focusing on a certain grammar function, but there are moments when they turn their attention to a language problem. So those three boys here were having a spelling problem, and they were really handling the situation completely in the target language. But for me, what was surprising that they were communicating on a much higher level than the spelling problem that they were trying to solve. It was quite surprising, what kind of competencies they were able to approach. So coming to evaluation, that being, I think, the final piece from the flower. Both in her practice and in the text, Leni promotes evaluation being done on regular basis, and of course being negotiated again between the learners, among the learners, and the learners knowing how to evaluate their performance. So once again, we are back to focusing both on the process and the product. So they shall be also able to evaluate how they have been learning, the stages, the methods, the naming the problems. So evaluation is always based on reflection. It's conducted in different ways. There might be checklists. On the left side, you can see a sample checklist that she included into one of her articles, giving, once again, teacher being responsible for giving students options or giving students some support in so as they can evaluate or self-evaluate their work. And in the video, we've seen that evaluation can also take form of discussions. This picture shows where there was a student ready to reflect on a problem they had in their group, on the difficulty they were facing when it was difficult to find a subject for their presentation or project, and they were able to reflect on it, to describe the difficulties, and also to analyze how they were able to overcome this difficulty. So I was trying to find information that would explain the flower model maybe in a bit more detail, and to try to find some illustrations for it in the other text. But I think what is crucial for how Leni Dam approaches autonomy is that is something that both that the teacher should be aiming at in their classrooms. They should try to get students on board. They might do it in stages, and it's a negotiated process, and it's a dynamic process where the agents collaborate as they work on, in her case, luckily enough, almost daily basis. We might not be so happy to do that in our classrooms. Okay, so I hope, so that's it for me. I will stop sharing, but as I said, I can we can go back to the images if we need them.